Hello, welcome to Herdstone Painting. My name is Mark and today we're going to be painting a Har Ganeth Executioner from the Dark Elf Army for Warhammer the Old World. Of course, these models are no longer really part of that range, but I feel like it's only a matter of time until they're brought across. And being an army from my past, I kind of wanted to revisit it with the hope that maybe we'll get new rules soon. So we're going to start off with the Elves skin. So we've undercoated the model with Mechanicus Standard Grey as a bit of a mid-tone, so that some of the lighter colours will pop a little bit more and be easier to cover. And that includes the Kislev flesh, so we're going to go in with that as a base coat. Now this is a layer paint, so you're going to want to make sure you do 2, possibly even 3 thin coats. 2 will probably be enough because the wash will cover up a lot of your sins. We're not going to use Reikland Fleshshade straight out of the pot. We're actually going to water this down because we've got quite a light skin tone here, and Reikland Fleshshade will bring it too far to the darker tones. So we're going to mix Reikland Fleshshade 50-50 with Lahmian medium and just wash that over the skin. And really, on this model, that's just his head, really. We're then going to make sure Kislev flesh is nice and watered down. Not too much, not so it's pooling like a wash. We just want it to be almost like a glaze, really. We're going to go back over all of the elements and relayer this onto the elf skin. We're then going to grab some flayed one flesh, and in the same process, make sure it's nice and watered down, and we'll glaze this over the higher areas. So we're actually going to do a highlight, and on his bald head, we're going to make sure we cover that entire area, leaving just a smidge of the Kislev flesh in the edges with the wash. And that's our elf skin done. So now we're going to focus on the lower elements of the metal, and we've split the metallic elements of this paint job in 2 and added the kind of colours in between because there's some deeper elements that need to be done. And whilst we were doing this, we could kind of do the sword, as I feel like that's a huge part of this model. So we're going to make sure that the Iron Warriors is nice and watered down. Now we're not using a wet palette here, never add this to your wet palette, just add it to a standard palette. And as you keep painting, you keep adding a little bit of water to keep it nice and hydrated. So make sure to paint all of the skirt and almost stipple it in more than anything else. And then for the weapon, just give it a nice coat. 2 coats of this will do really nicely, but the chainmail, just do 1. We're then going to do a liberal coat of Nuln oil over all of this. Now make sure that the metal is dry before doing this. It's very easy for some of the chainmail bits to stay wet and get all inside your wash pot, which you don't want to do. We're then going to grab some iron hand steel, and we're going to do an edge highlight around all of this weapon, as well as painting the lines down the middle. And on the cutting blade, we're actually going to add some feathering all the way along it in a kind of slicing direction, so it will be 90 degrees to the blade itself, just to make it look like that particular element's really sharp. Now, Dark Elves are pretty nasty a race of elves, so their weapons don't have to look as clean, I think, as the Dark Elves. We'll then grab a small little dry brush, and we're going to get some iron hand steel and do a dry brush over all of that chainmail. And then we're going to repeat the previous process, but just with Stormhost silver. And we're going to do an edge highlight on all of the weapon, but maybe not as far. So we're only going to do like the real edges, and then on the feathering on the weapon, we're just going to kind of paint over what we've previously done, just to make it look nice and sharp. And then again, we'll grab the small dry brush, and we're going to dust it this time. So not as much of a dry brush, but just make sure that you get the higher edges of that skirt. And once that's all been done, that element of the metal is finished, and we can get started on the trickier and more fiddly coloured elements. Okay, we're going to merge all of this together, the cloak, the sash, the skirt trim and the gloves. We're going to do 3 different parts here and wash them all at once. So we're going to start with Corvus Black, and that is for painting the very base of the skirt here, as well as a strap on the back of his head and the hilt of the weapon. So you can paint all of that in one go. And I believe there's a small piece just behind the gloves as well. There's another layer of fabric that this guy's wearing. I actually found these models rather basic. It was a bit of a flashback to some of the older kits from days gone by. So it was actually quite a nice treat to paint something like this, as I hope you guys find if you're ever going to paint your own executioners. We're going to grab Baraknar Burgundy and we're going to paint the sash, the cloak, and then the billows of the arms just underneath his shoulder, which are around the chainmail. Now, Baraknar Burgundy is quite a watery base paint, so you are going to want to do 2 thin coats of this. And then finally, we're just going to paint the gloves with dryad bark. And I do apologise, some of the footage got a little bit blurry here. I'm not sure if it's because of the long weapon, or maybe the new Herdstone logo I painted on the background. If it continues to do this, I'll probably flip my cutting board over. So once those 3 base coats are dry, and you're confident that they are, we're then going to grab some Nuln oil and just liberally apply this over all of those 3 elements. Be careful with the cape, it naturally just wants to flow all the way down. So just keep going back to the model as it dries and just continue to just pull the wash away down towards the base so you don't smear all of the lovely wash work that you've already done. Then we're going to move on to the cloak first, and we're going to relayer over with Baraknar Burgundy now. As mentioned, this is quite a thin paint anyway, but make sure it's watered down, and we're going to effectively repaint over, just leaving the Nuln oil in the recesses. But because it's so thin, a lot of the texturing that the Nuln oil will have done on the flat surfaces will still show through partially, so all of that work will still be visible. And then we're going to do some mixing here. So we're going to mix Baraknar Burgundy 75-25 first, and again make sure this is almost a glaze, so this is quite watered down. And we're going to paint over most of this, leaving the Baraknar Burgundy in the recesses, and then we'll do another coat 50-50 of the Burgundy and the Flayed One Flesh. Just paint over all of those elements, but just a little bit less, just building up that burgundy pinky purple colour across the whole cloak. And you can start picking out the higher elements as well on the second run round. And then we'll grab a final highlight here. So we're going to do an edge highlight on the cloak with a mixture of Baraknar Burgundy and Flayed One Flesh with 25-75 instead. The footage is a little bit blurry here again. I think it is the weapon, but we're just going to run in and do all the edges, all of the bottom, and just at the very top where the cloak's kind of creasing together, we'll add that highlight there too. And don't forget to do the sash and the elements on the arms for this as well. So to add a little bit of wear, we're going to grab that same mixture and just dry brush that off onto a kitchen towel, and then just dust the base of the cloak here, just to give it a bit more of a worn effect. Like, these aren't high elves at the end of the day, they're not going to be as clinical and clean as their Elf 1 kin. And then we're going to get some dryad bark, and we're going to do the same thing, but really feather it. So it's going to make it look a little bit more dirty, like this guy's been out on campaign for a little while. But yeah, you can skip this stage if you like, but I feel like it just adds a little bit more realism to the base of the model. And here's the finished cloak. I think it turns out pretty well, and of course we're trying to think about how to mass paint these as well, rather than making this look like a beautiful piece. It's how could you paint 20 of these. So a quick process. I think thinning the paints really helps. Talking of thinning the paints, we want to now go in with a thin down layer of Corvus Black and paint over all of the black sections, leaving the Nuln oil in the deep recesses. We're going to go with Dark Reaper, which feels appropriately named for a Dark Elf model, and just do an edge highlight. Just highlight the top of the skirt, and then on the arms just do a little bit on the elbow, and on the hilt just pick up the higher edges, and that should suffice for this bit. And then finally, for the black, we're just going to get some Thunderhawk blue and just pick out the real edges of this, just any of the little folds that you notice on the bottom skirt, and just pick out the highest elements, just leaving a bit of that Dark Reaper underneath your second highlight here. Also adds a little bit of blue in there, so you've got the kind of purpley tones, lilac-y tones, as well as a kind of deep grey blue as well, which is a really nice triplet. We're going to go in with Dryad Bark and paint back over all of the gloves. We're going to relayer here, making sure it's nice and watered down again to make sure that that wash does show through on your relayering. We're going to follow the same principle as the black, and we're just going to edge highlight all of this with Gorfor brown. There's some straps here that I forgot to mention previously that are above the hilt of the sword, so just get in there and highlight all of those edges and all of the elements of the gloves. Normally the back of the gloves and the fingers are the best part to approach, and then get some blade brown and just add a very high edge highlight to all of that, leaving the Gorfor brown visible underneath. You can just do the very edges of the knuckles here and like the middle of the string on the weapon. So we're going back to some metallics now. So we're going to do the armour, the trim of the armour, and then the hilt of the weapon all at the same time. So I know we've split the Iron Warrior base coating here, but I hope you think it makes sense. I think that trying to paint this and then trying to get back in and paint the cloak underneath would just be all a little bit too fiddly. But we're going to go in and paint the armour elements with a nice smooth coat of Iron Warriors. You might want to do 2 coats of this, but again, keep the your palette nice and wet. Of course, don't use the wet palette as previously mentioned. Just keep adding water as you're painting to keep the paint nice and smooth. We'll then go over with a liberal, and I think probably fairly liberal here. Do go a little bit ham with it, and we'll wash this over all of the armor elements. Some of them are kind of hidden behind the weapon, so you may want to switch brush to something a bit smaller so you can get in there and apply the paint. Now we're not going to do any relayering. We're going to actually just use some Ironbreaker here, which I think is a bit of a lighter tone than Iron Hand Steel. So I thought we'd just mix it up a little bit. So we're going to get in there again, apologies for the blurry footage, but we're just edge highlighting all of the armor pieces here, as well as what's in his stomach and back. The next bit should be in focus. We'll then get in with some Stormhost silver and just pick out the real edges. We've also gone in with that Ironbreaker and painted around the trim, which is about to be brassy bronze. So make sure to get some lines in there as well, just to differentiate it from the brass elements that we're going to paint in a second. There's also a few rivets on his gloves that you can pick out now as well. Oh, don't forget the feet. I almost did. We're now going to get in with Runelord brass. Now it seems like the whole bottom of the model is Runelord brass. That's because it needs to contrast with the chainmail. So we're going to paint all of that Runelord brass, and then all of the trim on the shoulder pads. There's a lot on the chest, and there's an element on the back as well behind his neck that needs to be painted in the same colour. Now we're going to bring this Runelord brass more to a bronzy colour, I guess, in a way. And we're going to wash all of this with Seraphim Sepia, but of course make sure that your metal elements are dry. You do not want to get any of the metallic flecks into your nice wash. So just be careful of that when applying. We're then going to go in with some Sycorax bronze. Don't water down this paint too much, it's really thin. Apply it to your regular palette and just add a smidge of water. And you can go in and just relayer over all of these elements to make it a little bit more bronzy / brassy. I feel like it's still more brass than bronze, but whatever. And then just like on the metal elements, the steel elements, we're going to go in with Stormhost silver, our final little highlight, and just pick out all of the extreme edges on all of the brass elements. And there's only one more thing to do here, and that is the Executioner's mask itself. So I've gone for a real bone theme here, and we're going to paint this how we would paint a normal skull. So we're going to grab some Steel Legion drab and just base coat the entire mask. Again, it's blurred again here. Oh, again, oh no, still blurred. Anyway, really frustrating, but 2 thin coats of this will cover it nicely. We're then going to make sure we get in with some Agrax Earthshade and just wash over all of this. Make sure you grab a small brush here, because this is the final step. You don't want to get all of this brown wash over all of your nice work, especially the skin, so do be careful around the edges. We're We'll then grab some Baneblade Brown. Now all of these we're going to water down fairly nicely, and we're almost going to glaze them on. We're going to paint all of the highlights here in Baneblade Brown, leaving only the real deep recesses with that Steel Legion Drab and Agrax Earthshade mix. So you're almost repainting over everything here. Then going to grab some Herdstone, following the same principle. And we're going to make sure it's nicely watered down, and we're going to layer back over the Baneblade Brown areas, leaving some of it visible, but we're almost building a texture here. We're kind of building up to the bone effect. So just keep going over what we've already done, and it will just give it that texture by the end. We're then going to grab some Flayed One Flesh. Again, fairly watered down. We want to kind of glaze over all of our work here. We're going to paint this over everything we've done, leaving some of that previous Herdstone and Baneblade Brown visible. But don't worry too much if there's areas you can't do that. It's just more of a textural thing, as mentioned. You can use a Shabty bone here, of course, if you would prefer. I just find Flayed One Flesh just feels really bright and pops in comparison. And then finally, here is a very thinly watered down layer of White Sky just to pick out the very top of the skull, and maybe the eyebrows as well. And now we're not going to paint the eyes on this model. They are actually sculpted in, but I just felt they looked better and meaner, being just filled with the wash, really. But if you feel you're up for it, then go for it. But it will be a bit tight to get your brush in there. And there we have it. First Dark Elf that we painted on the channel. I did have an army back in 7th edition, and the theming was very different to this. I've kind of gone for a bit more of a standard theme for this Executioner, as if he had actually come from Har Ganeth, but I'm going to try and do a Clarkarond army with the intention of building it, you know, fully, and potentially going to some events. I haven't been to any Warhammer Fantasy events for a very long time, and I feel like a Dark Elf force would be quite different to what a lot of other folks may bring. But anyway, I hope you've enjoyed. Thanks ever so much to everybody who's watched these videos. Do like and subscribe if you have a moment. And of course, if you didn't enjoy the video, well, thank you for stopping by regardless. We do have a link.bio in our channel description, which can take you to Patreon. We have a WhatsApp community that we're trying to build up from scratch, as well as a few affiliate links and things like that. But until we return to Naggaroth, I shall see you all in the next one. Bye-bye.